All right, let's dive into something that's on a lot of our minds these days. How do we actually reclaim our own thoughts? Especially in a world where it feels like every single app, algorithm, and news story is fighting for a piece of our attention. We're going to unpack a pretty powerful toolkit for what you might call mental sovereignty.
And it really all boils down to this one single question. It might even feel a little unsettling to ask, but it's important. With all the noise, all the social pressure, all the algorithms, how much of what you think and believe and feel actually comes from you? You know, there's a name for this feeling of being pulled in a million directions. It's called cognitive conscription. And the idea here is that we're not just being influenced anymore. It's more like our thoughts, our very reflexes, are being actively recruited by systems we never even signed up for.
So what does this conscription actually feel like in our day-to-day lives? Well, the question it forces us to ask is about who's in control. Are you the one piloting your mind, or have you somehow ended up in the passenger seat?
Here's a really striking way to think about it. Some are calling this a post-husbandry age. And that metaphor is powerful, right? It suggests that our attention, our moods, even parts of our identities are being managed and, well, harvested, kind of like a farmer cultivating a field to get a very specific result.
Okay, so if that's the condition, how do we diagnose it? This is where a really interesting new idea comes into play. Conscripted bias theory. And trust me, it completely reframes how we think about bias.
This is a huge shift in thinking. See, we're all used to the old idea, right? That we have biases, that they're these little personal flaws or quirks inside our heads. But conscripted bias theory flips that completely around. It says our biases often aren't even ours. Instead, they're being recruited and activated by forces outside of us.
So who are these recruiting agents? Well, they're pretty much everywhere. We're talking about the algorithmic engines that decide what you see next, the online tribes that form around memes and shared ideas, the constant feedback loop of social rewards like likes and punishments like getting canceled. All these systems are designed to find our pre-existing biases and then enlist them for their own goals.
And here's why that's so dangerous. When a bias gets conscripted, it stops being a simple mental shortcut, and it becomes a performance, a way to signal you belong to the right group. This makes our reactions incredibly predictable, super easy to monetize, and ultimately it turns our own minds into a tool for our own capture. Some even call this menticide, the death of the independent mind.
Okay, so if that's the diagnosis, what's the antidote? The first tool is a totally new way of seeing, called the survival gaze of hypernihility. And I know that sounds incredibly negative, but just hang with me for a second.
The key is to reframe this completely. This isn't about pathology, it's not about believing in nothing. Think of it more like a survival instinct. It's the clear-eyed view you have to adopt when you realize that so many of the stories we're told are actually designed to capture us. It's a tool for getting through a jungle of weaponized information.
And you put this gaze into practice by asking a series of sharp questions about any story or idea you come across. First up, what is this thing actually built on? What are the hidden assumptions holding it all together?
Next, you gotta follow the power. Cui bono? Who really benefits when this idea spreads? Is it about money? Is it about influence? Is it about control?
Then you start thinking about where it's all going. What's the trajectory? If this is the argument today, what's the next version of it going to look like tomorrow?
And maybe the most powerful question of them all, by making you focus on this, what is this narrative trying to keep you from seeing? What's being hidden right out in the open?
And when you start asking these questions all the time, something really cool happens. You stop getting caught up in the drama of the current argument. Instead, you start to see the entire life cycle of an idea play out. Where it came from, its moment in the sun, how it starts to fall apart, and what idea is already waiting to take its place. You see the machinery behind the show. Okay, so seeing the machinery is a huge first step. But you still need some solid ground to stand on, right? And that brings us to the second part of the toolkit, actively establishing sanity as your new baseline.
This table just lays out the difference so clearly. Over on one side, you've got what you could call performative morality. The goal there is just applause. It's about belonging to the group. But on the other side, you have sanity-based ethics, and that's all about internal coherence, about stable, independent thought. One road leads to capture, the other leads to sovereignty.
And this leads to a really profound conclusion. In an era of mass manipulation, maybe the most ethical thing you can do, your biggest civic duty even, is to simply protect your own ability to think for yourself. Your mental sovereignty becomes job number one.
But how do you actually do that in a world that's constantly trying to pull you back into the chaos? The source material offers this fantastic metaphor to help us, thinking about your core beliefs as a kind of personal, unhackable ledger. You can call it your SanityCheck.Blockchain.
To get why that's so necessary, you just have to look at the cycle of capture we're all stuck in. It starts with our data being captured. That data is then used to capture our attention. That attention is then used to shape our identity, which then captures our emotions, and finally our behavior, which of course just creates more data to feed right back into the start of the loop.
And that's exactly why data is the critical piece here. This isn't just about information. It's your story. It's your life's history written down. So if you lose control of your data, you're essentially losing control of your own narrative. So, let's bring it all home. The big takeaway here is that in the world we live in now, the fight to hold on to a coherent, independent self, well, it's not just some philosophical game. It's become a basic survival imperative. There's a line in the source material that just says it all perfectly. Sanity isn't just the absence of madness. It is the presence of selfhood. It's about having that internal compass that lets you know what you know, no matter what pressures are coming from the outside.
And that leaves us with the final question, one for all of us. When the slow erosion of the self, that mental side we talked about, isn't a bug but a core feature of the system, the responsibility has to fall back on us. The only question is, what are you going to do to protect yours?